Hello, I am Jennifer Braverman,
And I'm Ellen Selm,
and welcome to our podcast, Stories from the Earth.
where we explore humankind's relationship and connection with the natural world.
We'd like to take a quick moment to invite our listeners to consider supporting us through a humble little donation. If you go to our Anchor page and click the support button, there are options to donate for $1, $5, or $10. The donation will go to helping us with future projects, such as launching our herbal educational curriculum we've dubbed the People's Herb School, as well as funding to help take the show on the road and do some on-site reviews and interviews at herb farms and schools and other interesting places relevant to our podcast. You can also give us a rating and a comment on Apple Podcasts.
Today we are diving in with Rebecca Beyer. Am I saying your last name right?
Beyer,
the founder of Blood and Spicebush School of Old Craft here in Western North Carolina. Rebecca likes to help people get more in touch with nature and plant medicine by teaching people how to incorporate old ways back into a cyclical life. She has a bachelor's degree in plant and soil science and a master's in Appalachian studies and sustainability with a concentration in Appalachian Ethnobotany. Rebecca likes to practice research and write about Appalachian traditional folk magic and witchcraft, primitive living skills, homesteading, foraging, ethnobotany, and other folk ways. Together, she refers to this approach as Hedgecraft.
Welcome, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us today. To start things off, could you tell us the story behind the chosen name of your school and practice, Blood and Spicebush?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's kind of weird, I guess. People are always perturbed by the name because it has the word blood in it, and I think it's kind of scary. And I was not a tattooer when I started the school, so it had nothing to do with the fact that I stab people for a living now. But blood and spicebush refers to the tonic tradition of using spicebush twigs in the spring as a tea to move the blood in Appalachian folk medicine. I was always really moved by the theory of blood in Appalachian folk medicine, and I think it just kind of like seemed like a, in 2014 when I started my blog, like a cool, edgy name. So it was the name of my blog, and eventually became my little school.
It's still very cool and edgy.
Yeah, it's memorable, stands out.
Thank you.
So between herbalism and botany, folk magic, homestead living skills, like what did you get interested in first? What were you dabbling, and then the study and practice of one thing led to another? And if so, why?
Well, I started with witchcraft when I was 12. I went to a Unitarian Universalist church in Princeton, New Jersey. It was very beautiful. And my Sunday school teacher was Wiccan and introduced me to Wicca. And luckily, my family didn't care. And so I was able to study pretty formally witchcraft at a pretty young age. Eventually switched into studying traditional witchcraft when I learned more about that in my early 20s. And I think through being interested in worshiping nature, it kind of opens the door to wanting to live more fully integrated in the natural world. I started doing a living history because I'm also a history nerd and a horse girl, right? It's like a gateway drug to witchcraft. Girl, I've discovered, right? This is my spicy take. And so I worked in the 1890s on a farm in full historical garb.
Oh, wow.
Classes in New Jersey, also in Lambertville at Howell Living History Farm when I was 19. And I learned how to farm organically with horses. And I was never happier in my entire life. I don't think I'd ever been happy really at all until that moment. And I was like, oh, witchcraft lives in this space like perfectly. So that was what led me to go and get a degree in agriculture and pursue herbalism.
I love those. When I was younger, I still do. I love those like living historical museums. In fact, we went on a trip cross country when I was 9, and I've got this real dorky picture of me, and like we went to like the Lower Ingalls Wild or something, and I got a sun bonnet, and I've got it on, and I'm just like,
I had a bonnet too. Yeah. I see you. Your gateway drug to herbalism and witchcraft is wearing bonnets.
Yeah. What a great way to like see how it kind of just naturally grew. Like, you were plowing the soil with the horses and it sort of metaphorically then was like, oh, sowing the seeds for the trajectory of the rest of your life.
Yeah, if I had only known. I was so happy that summer. Still think about it really fondly.
What kind of things did you learn in your graduate program of Appalachian Studies? And when I read on your website about this program, I was like, oh my gosh, that's the program like I totally should have gone to. Like, I was doing college again because it sounded really cool, and I had no idea that that was in existence. So.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's very self-led, so I won't say I learned anything about ethnobotany from the program, but I had time and energy to give myself time to learn about that. And I actually made a website while I was in grad school that's linked on my website, and it's a living bibliography about Appalachian ethnobotany that I've compiled everything I've found, and I've reviewed a lot of articles and things on it too. And anytime someone sends me something, I put it on there. It's organized by topic. So check that out on my website, bloodandspicebush.com, if you want to find the Appalachian Ethnobotany database. And what it did was it really gave me the tools to be a good writer and researcher. Not that I'm a great writer, but just how to deliver information in the written word effectively and truthfully, and be scrupulous with my research. I really appreciated classes I took on comparative mountain studies, comparing different mountain communities around the world. That was one of the coolest classes I took. I loved my program. I really enjoyed it. I was going through a lot at that point in my life, and I having that program was so nice as like my anchor. It's really special.
Geographically, I'm trying to picture, I know the Appalachian chain goes up and clips into Pennsylvania, and it sounds like you grew up in New Jersey. Were you down here in North Carolina by the time you went to school and did those studies, or were you studying further north along the chain here, mountain chain?
Yeah, no, and that's the main question Appalachian Studies asks is, number one, is Appalachia real? I think that's kind of funny. There are the Appalachian Mountains, that's a place, but Appalachia as a concept, as a construct, that is what Appalachian Studies focuses on. And the cultural Appalachia, which is like the mountain south. That's usually how I describe it personally, because I was born in Pennsylvania in Appalachia, and my family's all from Western PA in Pittsburgh, and it's not the same culturally as Western North Carolina or West Virginia or Southwestern Virginia or anywhere like that. I moved here when I was 22 and from Vermont after I finished my ag degree, and I've lived here for about 12 years now. And I went to App State for the Appalachian Studies degree, so I'd already lived here for quite a few years. I thought I wanted to be a professor, and then I found out how much they get paid, and I changed my mind.
But you were down here kind of immersed in it, and I guess you were like, I want to learn more about all of this, the thick of where I am, kind of. Is that part of what prompted you to go back for that?
That, and my friend Mark Williams, who's an amazing botanist and one of my teachers and colleagues, told me about the program, and he had done it, and I was really inspired by him and his knowledge of the local flora and fauna. And so he really convinced me to do it. And I also was teaching for the Chestnut School of Herbalism at that point in their online program. And Juliet was like, I taught the soil science section because that's what I studied in undergrad. And Juliet Blankenspore was like, Becky, you're really smart. You should get a PhD. I don't think anybody had ever been like, Becky, you're really smart. I think like people were like, you're a know-it-all and you never shut the frick up. But like, she really just looked me in the eyes and told me, I think, she told me, she's like, you should go get a degree or something, like go do this. And then I did, and I dedicated my thesis to her because she really inspired me to do it.
That's awesome.
I had been like hoboing most of the time up to that point in my life, and I was a heavy drinker and like just not living in a great way, and I was never able to really make much money, and I wanted a good career, and I thought that teaching would be that for me. So all those things combined led me to that program.
The inspiration then for you to take all that interest in knowledge, and you were like, okay, no, I'm not going to be a professor. I'm going to put all this together, and then Blood and Spicebush forms. How did that come about?
Oh man. So while I was in my last 6 months of grad school, I got divorced, and I had a whole life shift. Moved back to Asheville and just commuted for the last couple bits of my schooling. and I had no job, and I was like, it was a bummer. And I got offered this job teaching foraging classes with No Taste Like Home in Asheville with Alan Muscat. And I really got to like flex my plant ID skills, and I started teaching foraging full time. And I started blogging more fully and teaching witchcraft classes on my own through Blood and Spicebush, just trying to hustle, honestly. I was so broke and like just wanted to see if I could do it. And I was going through a huge transformation in my life. I got sober and like did a bunch of other crazy stuff. And that was when I started teaching like crazy. And people gave me good feedback about my teaching. So I kept doing it more and more.
It's funny that happens. So you get some encouragement and you just sort of like, okay, this is what I should do more of. This is, yeah.
That's wild.
That's nice, because you had the draw and the thought to consider teaching, but now in this way you're getting to kind of do it on your own terms, which is nice.
Yeah, I was surprised that I started out just like, I have a, like, what do you call it? A semi-large following on Instagram for not trying very hard. And I'm always pretty shocked that many people want to hear about plant lore. I'm like, that's cool. But back then it was really hard to get the word out about my classes. So I would flyer a lot, and I would actually meet people walking around with like flyers to hang up at coffee shops and stuff.
The olden days.
I know, back in the
guerrilla marketing.
2016, yeah.
Right.
The old days.
So you have some educational offerings on your website in addition to sometimes being a guest teacher or lecturer at colleges and other area events related to herbalism or permanent living skills, which we've sort of been talking about. Can you talk a bit about the kinds of things you like to teach? Expand on that a little bit?
Of course, yeah. I've never been able to like stick with one thing, I guess. So I teach a very large variety of classes. Handicrafts, I teach fishnet weaving, basket making, a variety of types, greenwood spoon carving. Those are my 3 kind of crafts that I like to teach. I feel comfortable with teaching. I've also taught crochet hook carving and Nalbindin needle making and things like that. With witchcraft, I like to teach traditional witchcraft and anything to do with that. I sometimes teach like focused classes on like just the seasonal holidays or just the tools, things like that. I teach herb lore classes that are focused on specific holidays, like the herb lore of Samhain or the herb lore of Beltane.
Nice.
Those are my favorite classes to teach. I don't know why, but herb lore is definitely my top thing. And then I teach
you combine the plants with the witchcraft in one thing. That's great.
Bless it all day long. We love it. And then I teach Appalachian folk medicine and magic classes that are often lecture style at universities or history based. And I love those ones. Sometimes I teach them as hands-on classes. I did an Appalachian Nervines and Appalachian folk medicine class at Wild Herb Weekend a couple years ago. One of my favorites that I've done. It was a great class. I've taught horsemanship for the homestead and draft horse stuff and horse stuff and gardening planning, organic gardening, soil stuff. I teach a little bit of everything, but these days I'm only teaching my Hedgecraft program as I've narrowed my teaching a little bit.
You've dabbled enough and got enough following that you can kind of zero in on the ultimate love. And it sounds like the Hedgecraft approach, it peppers in a lot of these different facets. So it's kind of like you get to touch on a little bit of everything, but in a more focused way because it's all in one program.
Yeah, for me, Hedgecraft was kind of like the answer to like, what do I do every day? Like, you wake up and you're like, well, I'm going to go forage some, bittercress and chickweed and chop it up, put it in my eggs from the chickens. And, somebody's got a cut. I'm going to pull out my salve that I made with plantain for them. Like, it just is like I wanted to show the life way that one could live when you are integrated with wild food and medicine, but in a context, especially for folks of European ancestry, to do within like a traditional witchcraft container instead of like culturally appropriating like pseudo Eastern and like Native American and Black folk practices.
I know that and we've talked on this podcast about learning about your roots and where you came from and then how not to appropriate other cultures and while learning about yours, but also like, yeah. So
it's complex for sure. It's super hard and weird. Yeah, it's hard.
But it's such a beautiful thing to have the realization that it's like, oh yeah, like at some point everybody was tribal, like everybody had a clan. Everybody, you might have to go across the pond or further back in history, but it's there. When you think of it like that, it's like, why does anybody need to try to appropriate anything? I mean, besides it's just rude to do, but you don't need to, because it's like it's all there in your own history. You just have to learn the ways that your roots kind of filter down in and connect in and to that greater tree of everything, I guess.
Ask questions like I know that a lot of my ancestors are from Russia and Romania, but then I'm just like, well, where?
Yeah, where?
So I was going to ask my cousin who's doing some of this research and stuff like that, but it was really interesting because all this stuff about Ukraine and stuff, and I was like, wait a second, I since a lot of my ancestors are from Russia, I'm like, well, yeah, and then it led me to that question of where, and I needed to know. I think it's just people have lived here for so many generations, and you just lose those connections, and sometimes they're hard to find. We just have all these pictures of people we don't know who they are, and basically where they're from, but not really. Russia's a very big place.
It's huge. Yeah.
But I know that like someone from where my ancestors were doing like herbalism. It just makes sense because they were probably in a little village somewhere.
Definitely. And I'm obsessed with researching things. You know what I mean? It's like I love researching and writing about stuff I'm interested in. And for me, it's like, I'm like, you don't even have to pick up a book. I got you. I made a handout. Here it is, $5. Like, learn about this stuff. So I'm trying to make it as easy as possible and as approachable as possible, because there's a lot to know. And I also love talking about just like basic animism and like the proto-religions of all humans, because, the world is like in a lot of pain right now, and people are very in pain and very divided. I think by healing and like looking within our own lineages and not saying that they're like the best and better than everyone else is at the same time, that we can hold space for like our friends who are suffering in marginalized communities, and by like just leaving them alone and not taking their stuff. Like, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
So, just like let them heal, do their thing.
There was I was listening to NPR, and then there was this lady, and she wrote a book, and now I can't remember the name of the book, but she was trying to trace his family history, because she's like, I know that there was she had some information that there was some shady stuff in her past, and she's like, I want to know about this so that I will be aware, so that I can sort of start this process of processing, I guess. And she kept digging and digging and digging, and it's like on the surface, this person who founded this town, they sounded great, but then they did also these other things. So it's just like your history, your personal history is just so complex.
Yeah, because like none of us are perfect. We've all done things that were like, yikes, oops, like that was bad. But it doesn't mean we're not still like here and kicking it and making new and better choices.
But it does bring it to a less like romanticized place, and a place where you can be like, okay, these were like real people and yeah, this stuff. So I thought that was a neat, like, maybe first step in some process of something that
healing or making up for the whatever generational craziness happened.
Yeah, I think that's where like looking at our privileges really can be effective, is thinking about the ways in which our like where we're at is directly due to the harm that our ancestors caused to other humans, and what we can do for them today that they are asking for specifically.
Yeah. Well, this is a very broad question, especially for someone who has their fingers into so many natural elements, but what inspires you most about the natural world?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I think it's complexity. It's interrelatedness. I love to feel like I'm right and that I know everything and that I know what's going on. And it is like, just kidding, Becky. You don't know anything. And it's like humbling. You'll never know. And that's great. There's no pressure. There's no pressure. You'll never know it all. And I think the wild, like the greenwood, lets us know that constantly with little miracles that we see, strange things that we see. So that's a great question.
Mysteries. There's
Yeah.
always more mysteries.
I love that. As a child, I was obsessed with the idea that if someone discovered how deep the ocean was, I didn't want to know. I was like, don't tell me I don't want to know. I want to think that there's like, I don't want to know how big space is, and I don't want to know how deep the ocean is. They want them to be infinite.
Well, fortunately, I don't think they actually know. So,
yay!
yay!
Thank you for affirming me.
I'm pretty sure there's some like really, really, really deep ocean like crevices and like these big trenches that they haven't gone. They can't go down all the way. So
thank God. I just want the some places.
Yeah.
That nobody goes, you know.
Some unknowable places still are here. Yeah.
I think about, though, I mean, yes, that would be like an example of a very still ultimate mystery on our own planet, but like how much, especially this day and age where humans arguably live kind of more shut off from nature than we did even just a few generations ago, how much just like the seasonal cycle of an oak tree in your yard is a mystery to most people. How much can you learn by just like observing a tiny little area just that might be right outside your door, and it could blow your mind if you're open to, you know, exposing yourself to that. I feel like, I don't know, that's something that should be taught in schools. All right, children, it's time to go sit outside and just stare at a tree for an hour or something like that.
I'm always startled when I was teaching foraging tours. It was for a tour company, so I was like a tour guide for the forest, and people would cry on the tours semi-frequently. It was usually like femmes and women crying, or children actually would cry frequently because they would become overwhelmed.
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of amazing. And also I was always like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like we would eat all these wild foods, and they were learning how to identify plants and getting to taste them as we were walking. And they're like, you can just eat the world? Like, what the fuck?
My mind is blown.
I'm so sorry. What the heck? Yeah.
Oh, you can curse.
Awesome. I was like, let me just drop the F-bomb in the middle of my interview. But people would get so overwhelmed, they would cry because they were like, why don't I know this? Mm-hmm. Why have I waited so long? Because I would teach them like 12 to 15 plants, and I would be like, yeah, and there's 4,000 here in Appalachia. And they'd be like, I'm crying. I was like, oh, yes, you are held. Like, if you feel like trash, you wake up and you feel like no one loves you, just go outside. There's like 8 plants that will heal you or feed you, and they won't charge you a dime, and they won't berate you or make fun of you. And I think I see people feel like that feeling of coming home, and then they cry because they just don't know how to process it. Yeah. It's beautiful and sad and like heartbreaking all at the same time.
We need more of that.
Yes, definitely. Like what you're saying with schools. Like I think in Asheville, where I live in a bubble, there's lots of nature schools and stuff. And I taught lots of school groups. And kids are like always so floored by the fact they can eat stuff from outside. They're just like, what? It's amazing.
Can you tell us some of your favorite ways to connect with the natural world, find peace, and stay grounded in your everyday life?
Yeah, honestly, when I was going through my divorce, I was having a really, and getting sober at the same time, I was having a really hard, well, maybe the hardest time I've had in my adult life. And having that foraging job, I was outside, for 3 to 4 hours every day, leading people on these tours. And I would go and stay after, I'd go early to scout. And I would be out foraging by myself, just foraging for myself. And I think still to this day, whenever I'm feeling some kind of a way, I'll just go out and forage by myself with nothing in mind, just to see what I can find. And it always makes me feel better. I always feel provided for, even if I'm like, I've made this mistake, I've done this thing that's wrong, or I'm having these hard feelings about social situations or relationship issues. It doesn't matter. I need humans. I'm a social being. I'm a social animal. But beyond humans. I am provided for and I am cared for. I would never say I'm like loved. I have struggled when people like personify plants like they love us. I don't know if I like vibe with that, but I do think that they coexist and co-evolve with us, and we're interconnected and undivorceable, and it's really special.
Like there's a certain level of symbiosis there, more or less to a degree, depending on how we engage, I guess.
That's a great way to say it.
So one of the services that it shows you offer on your website is land consultations. Can you explain for our listeners what that is and why you like to do it and offer it as a service?
So if you're a dentist and you go on a date and someone's like, hey, I heard you're a dentist, do you want to clean my teeth? That's kind of what I get when people are like, hey, you're a forager, will you for free take me foraging and teach me things for free? I'm always like, that's what I do for my job. Like, I don't really want to do it for free. So that's where the land consultations were kind of born out of, because so many people were emailing me like, hey, if you ever want to come over and like show me all the things in my yard, that'd be great. I'm like, I should make that a service. And so I started doing these like basically like a private tour of your own land or a place that you care about, and I'll make you a spreadsheet of all the plants and trees that I will show you there and tell you how to work with them.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. It's really fun.
Do you like go over at like a certain time of year? Is there like a better time, or do you sort of come back through the seasons?
Yeah, I think some like spring or summer is nice. If it's just trees, I can go any time of year. But if it's like if someone's just mostly concerned, like what trees are these, we can go anytime. But I wouldn't go for winter really if people want to know the herbaceous plants because they're just not up. But yeah, that's any of those seasons is great. And so I do offer like you can have me come back for all 4 seasons to get like a full picture.
Ellen, your cat is back. This is Amos. He has decided to join the podcast. I think he's found his favorite plant.
Oh,
unless you
look at that window.
Oh, the window.
He's on patrol.
He's not usually up here. So.
That's so cute.
He came to say hi. Everyone will have to watch if you're listening, you'll have to look at the YouTube video to see the cat. Okay, so one of our favorite questions to ask are, what are some of your favorite books you'd recommend pertaining to herbs, hedgecraft, primitive living skills, etc.?
Well, I conveniently on my website made a reading list.
Okay.
Page. It's a very large list.
Well, I can put the link to the list.
I can give you some highlights though if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for primitive skills, I love the Primitive Skills Bulletin. It is a discontinued magazine, but they compiled it into a book. And if you look up Primitive Skills Bulletin, you can find it. It's great. It has tons of just like people who are passionate about old ass skills sending you pictures and stuff about them. And then for herbalism, that's a tough one. There's so many. One book I love right now is Witchcraft Medicine. It's a book about Proto-European uses of herbs and folk magical uses of herbs from some German writers that I really love. And Witchcraft Medicine is one of my most used books in my research.
Nice.
And that hits the kind of double whammy. I also love Secret Medicines from Your Garden, which is a beautiful book, herbal book that I really love. That's grounded in herb lore, but by, oh my gosh, you have to forgive me. The author's name is escaping me, but I can send it to you if you can't find it. And for foraging, I love Sam Thayer's books. He is the best foraging book author, in my opinion. Has Nature's Harvest and Nature's Garden and Wild Edibles. So those are some of my favorites.
You find the plants he covers it's pretty applicable to our region, or is it focused on this region, or?
No, he's from
so broad that it covers a lot of it.
Yeah, it's like temperate plants. So if you live on the East Coast, it'll work great for you. Florida, maybe not, but there's some good Florida guides out there.
So what role do you feel that primitive living skills and hedgecraft practices can play in the future, say, if health and healing and living a more ecologically balanced life? Like, if you, as your school grows, as you gain more students, like the grand vision, what does this help people achieve for the future?
I really want people to realize that they're just very capable and that they can feed themselves and heal simple things at home very easily. The first time I treated myself for a UTI with herbs and it worked, I was like shook. I was like, you can just do this at home? Like, you don't have to take pills and get a yeast infection? Like, sick. This is the best. I was just like floored. And I want people to feel the comfort that comes from like being in relationship with the like other than human world again. And I'm building a house with my partner right now on our land that we steward, and I think people think that we forage all of our food and are like just perfect primitive skills practitioners, but like we live a very like integrated modern life that incorporates those things in it, and are always looking to figure out ways to do that makes sense, that don't hurt our bodies. And I think as we go forward, the world is changing rapidly right now, and we don't know what's going to happen. And you'll never regret learning 50 plants you can eat outside. I just tell you that right now. And you'll never regret learning how to deal with burns with herbs, or how to deal with the UTI, or deal with thrush, or deal with simple things that happen to all of us all the time. And yeah, and just feel cared for and connected, and feel like there is meaning to your life and to your place here, even if it is not in the context of religion or spirituality. It doesn't matter. Like, you are still meaningful. Your existence is meaningful, and other things have meaning that are around you, and you have relation with them, no matter what like people bring to Hedgecraft. Because I have folks who are like Catholic witches, or folks who are Jewish witches, or don't even identify as a witch, but they like the Hedgecraft like as a concept. And it's amazing to watch people connect with each other too, and find healing, because all of us don't show up because we have no trauma, or like because we're not working on something. I love that aspect of the class is nice. Everyone becomes friends and really is sweet to each other, and it's really special to be in their presence.
It's a very big empowerment thing, all of that you just said. It's like giving people back to themselves a little bit.
I love that. Yeah, that's beautifully said.
The opportunity to work with people instead of sort of competition, and in a different way than probably their normal day-to-day lives. I feel like a lot of times, from just what I've heard feedback with the people around me, that it's hard to get the connection.
Yeah, everything's working against us in that right now in life, and it's like, you don't have to do anything like that. You don't have to live your life in such a way that you can't make a salve or like make tea. Like, you don't have to go full living in a bark hut to like have a deep and meaningful connection with the natural world. And also to just remember that it's not actually separate from us. Like in this house I'm in right now, I'm in nature. This is part of nature. I'm part of nature. You are part of nature. And like, the biggest lie I think we've ever been told is that you have to go back to it, that you were gone from it. Even in the city, like, we made those things out of other things. It's like this weird illusion,
I go around work thinking about, I'm like, this plastic we made this, or with
it's dinosaurs.
Yes, it's nature. I love it when, like, I've never ever really thought about fossil fuel and the name fossil fuel, and literally like you're burning like very old dinosaur bones or dinosaurs, and it's just hilarious to think about.
It's wild.
That
who made this stuff up? I'm honestly like, I need to talk to the manager, because like, how did they figure this out? I'm really concerned.
They're marketing geniuses. Also black gold, like,
yeah,
I heard that as an example because they're just like gross, slimy, black mud. It's not very.
Here we go.
Sellable, but black gold, yeah.
It's like compost, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. The other black gold.
Yeah, exactly.
So what is your definition of health and healing?
Whoa.
Yeah.
Love it. Slap it right on there. Health for me, I don't know. I have chronic illness. I have a weird, rare autoimmune disease and called lichen planus that sucks. And I think from outside people go, oh, look at that person. They're healthy. They're like, they walk around, they have eyes, like they talk, they're healthy. And it's so tough because health is so subjective,
Mm-hmm.
I think health is a self-awareness and a cultivation of continuing to function our best way and making adjustments and choices and necessary medicines or foods or actions to ensure that continued function to the best of our ability. And I think for healing, I don't like it. It's like I feel very challenged when people are like, I am a healer. I'm like, no, stop. What are you talking about? I feel personally triggered by that because I'm a jerk. I'm an asshole. And I just feel like if you say, I want to heal, that's what I love. I'm like, yes, that's amazing. I want to help people heal. Great. That's beautiful. I struggle with when people self-identify as healers because I think it's a lot of presumption because we really don't know what other people need exactly to heal. And maybe what we have will heal one person, but not the other. And that's why I love teaching people how to make medicine because I'm not a clinical herbalist. I don't give people prescriptions or herbal medicines regularly. I rather teach them how to make relationship with, and make their own medicine. And I don't think, like, I'm also not one of those people who's like intuitively just like, I know what I must do. Here is the plant. It has whispered unto me its secrets. Like, I'm very scientific in a lot of ways with herbal medicine. I think that healing and health both also are like a big undertaking of learning and education and community and sharing and talking and humbling ourselves to ask other people's opinions and community of coming together. If we have a weird autoimmune disease on my Facebook support groups, we learn so much together. So yeah, those are really, really in-depth and broad questions, but I'm kind of a jerk. I'm sorry. It's just I struggle.
No, it's okay.
I think it's a very valid position to take. It's part of what makes the balance. And I mean, at the end of the day, an individual's body's their body. So there's a huge component of healing that's going to have to come from and through them, that anybody who's helping facilitate that is doing just that. I mean, it's helping facilitate that. Then no more, no magic, cha-da, you're better because I pronounce you to be so, it's like, there's got to be I don't know.
The person has to do the work.
Co-creative element in that process, I guess.
I love that. Yeah. One weird thing, my disease doesn't have any cure, and there's very few remedies for like constant skin discomfort. And many people have discovered that if you just think, I'm not itchy, I'm not itchy. That's like the only way you can stop it. And I didn't believe that at first, but like, it's like, you have to just literally use your will to kind of overcome this. And it is literally can work, and it's caused like dramatic shifts for people, including myself. And I had to do it to believe it. And alongside other, lifestyle changes and stuff. And it is amazing what you can do with mindset shift alone in terms of chronic pain, chronic illness. Obviously, it's not a cure-all, but you do have some power there. And it's really incredible to claim it. You have the ability to.
And I think, I don't remember exactly how you worded it, but I will, when we edit this and re-air it, rewind and listen again, because I think you said it so well. Your starting answer to the whole question, the way you phrased it was such a nice thought that I feel like sometimes anybody who is dealing with chronic issues, it's so hard to not get stuck in sort of the mire of it, the repetition of it, and not seeing the end of it, especially if there's no known cure and all of that. So the way you worded it made me think, oh, that's very forgiving to the self. Like you're giving yourself permission to meet yourself where you are at a given day or a given moment and being like, well, this is the best I can do right now. But that's still health and that's still healing because you're at least acknowledging it and doing something with it, which is awesome.
Yes. I love that. Thanks for saying that. Yeah. Because I don't think of myself as unhealthy personally, even though I've had some pretty serious health issues, and I feel healthy right now. And that's great. Maybe tomorrow I won't, but I'm really grateful that today I feel healthy.
I think a lot of even the term chronic has the idea in it where it just doesn't end. It sort of goes on. And so you have to find a way to reconcile that, a way to think about that, a way to work through sort of, I'm going to have this. But there is the agency of I can do something, I think is very important when you have a chronic illness. I think it just makes all the difference. And instead of like, I'm sick, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah. You have to vacillate between being like, this is the dumbest thing ever, and like, I'm the best and I'm unstoppable. Like, you have to kind of ride the wave.
I'm amazing. I'm a superhuman. And then you're like, I'm going to crawl into bed now. And just sort of, I don't want to see anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Rebecca, on your journey with all of these interests of yours, has there been anybody who's really inspired and supported you along the path? Anybody you would consider a mentor? I know you mentioned Mark Williams and Juliet with Chestnut Herbs. Yeah, along the whole process, anybody you'd like to shout out?
Definitely. I apprenticed with Natalie Bogwalker of Wild Abundance School in 2011, and I've taken over 3 of her classes, and we're going to teach them at our place for the first time this year.
Nice.
And Natalie really taught me a lot of all kinds of stuff, and she's still a good friend, and she supports me a lot. She promotes my work a lot, which I always appreciate. And there's so many people. Sarah Ann Lawless of Bane Folk. I was super inspired by her blog in like 2014 when I stumbled across it, I think, or even earlier. Her writings on traditional witchcraft and bioregional herbalism really, really influenced me in my work. And Marcus McCoy with Troll Cunning Forge, who had the website Bioregional Animism, which really blew my mind. And he taught me that term and concept, and is still a good friend of mine also. And there's so many people. I'm a huge extrovert, if you haven't picked it up yet. And I love to talk to people, and I keep a wide net of correspondence with all my different interests and communities, with lots of crossover, of course. But there's so many people. I would not be able to do these things without the incredible kindness, support, and sharing of my communities.
You have an upcoming book called Wild Witchcraft. Can you give us a brief description of what this book is about and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, it's spells, rituals, and remedies from your garden, and foraging for magical herbs. It's basically a foraging and gardening guide specifically focused on magical uses of plants. And I really tried to go, we went into everything from soil science and basic organic gardening to foraging ethics and how to make choices about what plants to work with in the wild. And I'm really curious how it'll be received. It's beginner friendly, largely, but focused heavily on plant lore. And it has a whole section about rituals to do the wheel of the year for the pagan holidays, recipes for teas and salves and oxymels and honeys and all the stuff that I make in Hedgecraft, basically, with my students. Yeah.
When is it coming out officially?
Comes out May 10th, 2022.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Simon & Schuster. They actually emailed me and were like, will you write a book? I was like, what? Okay, sure.
Nice.
Yeah, I was very surprised. I was like, how did you find me? Like, what is... Okay, sure, I'll do that. It was my second little book. I wrote a book for Three Hands Press called Fever Tree, Appalachian Charms Against Fever last year. That was my first actual published work. And so I'm really excited about this one. This is like my big book, my big boy book. Yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. I'm really anxious about it, but excited at the same time.
I mean, I don't know enough about the genre and the crossover between witchcraft related books and herbal books. I'm sure there's a lot of intertwining, but the fact that you're covering the foraging and the wild element, the fact that you're covering the ecological impact element, the agriculture, soil science element, plus the magic. I mean, it definitely sounds like something that's going to be pretty unique and filling a niche that's not really probably out there very much, which is cool.
Yeah, I hope it's helpful. I hope it makes they made the book really affordable, which I really appreciated, and I just hope that it's accessible. That's my hope.
So do you have any other upcoming events or educational opportunities you're going to be offering that you want to share with the audience? It's worth adding as a note for our listeners here that Rebecca is also an accomplished tattoo artist, specializing in gorgeous nature-inspired botanical and animal black line work. So for images of that, you can find out that and more details about her practice there on her website. But yeah, as far as teaching and any other kind of public events you might be part of, what do you have on the docket for 2022?
Well, actually, I'm not doing a lot, which is exciting. I've been like grinding over the past 5-6 years, and my partner and I are really focusing on building our house right now, and that's a lot of our lives are going towards that. And once that's done, I think we'll have more to do. But I'm teaching those courses through Wild Abundance, and unfortunately all my courses are sold out for the year. But I'm working on online offerings for my wider than North Carolina community, and I have one online class up, the Folk Magic of Hildegard von Bingen's Herbs, one of my favorite mystical nuns. It's a $35 online class, and you can take it anytime. If you're curious about it, just check us out. And I'm hoping to do more and more of that. I am looking to teach less in the future and write more. So I'm excited to focus on writing.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We'll look forward to more books. And this podcast should come out, well, I have to check. It should come out before your book. But if it doesn't, everyone still needs to check out your book.
We'll be having an event at Malaprops on,
awesome.
Let me check when the date is. On May 17th at 6 p.m. if you want to get a book signed by me and hang out.
Yeah. This podcast is supposed to air sometime in April, so the end of April, so that should be plenty of time. If you're in the Asheville area, you can go to Malaprops. You know where Malaprops is if you live here.
Yeah, you'll figure it out. Just Google it.
So I want to thank Rebecca. Thank you so much for chatting with us today. We're super awesome. And thank you to everyone for listening. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and listen to us on Anchor, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. All of Rebecca's links are going to be in the description, so you can follow her on all of her platforms. If you would like to support us with your dollars, you can go to our Anchor page and click the support button.
Thank you all so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, guys. Well, we will talk to you next time.
See you next time. For more stories from the earth. Thank you.
Bye.